and welcome to the Menopause Mindshift Self-Love Podcast, where we are inspiring women in menopause to unleash their inner queen, write their own story, and define their own menopause journey. I am your host, the Menopause Queen, Lisa R. Triggs, certified menopause coach, certified neuroscience coach, motivational speaker, and best-selling author of The Menopause Mindshift, How I Unleashed My Inner Queen, and you can too. This is a space for real, honest conversations about menopause, because menopause isn't just about hormones. It's neurological, it's emotional, and it's deeply personal. After 20 years of navigating menopause, I've learned that what most women are missing isn't more information, it's a different way of seeing themselves. And in this podcast, we talk about what's really happening in your body, your brain, and the tools that support you in feeling better. You'll hear from inspiring guests, as well as the insights and perspective shifts that changed everything for me. Because self-love in menopause isn't a luxury, it's the foundation. So if you are ready to think differently about menopause, reconnect with yourself, and define your own journey, you are in the right place. What if I told you there are over 80 symptoms of menopause? And many women have no idea that what they are experiencing is actually connected to it. Today's guest is on a mission to change that and to make sure women are no longer left guessing about their own bodies. I'm joined by Tafiq Akhir, also known as Mr. Menopause, and the author of Decoding the 80 Symptoms and Side Effects of Menopause. He is a certified and award-winning menopause educator, speaker, and host with over 20 years of experience in women's hormones, health, and weight management. Tafiq is passionate about helping women understand what's happening in their bodies so they can make informed and intentional decisions about their care. His work was inspired by watching his own mother struggle through menopause without support, which led him to make menopause education his mission. Hello and welcome to the Menopause Mindshift Self-Love Podcast, where we are helping women unleash their inner queen and define their own journey. I am your host, the Menopause Queen, Lisa R. Triggs. And welcome to Tafiq, Mr. Menopause. Welcome so much. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me on. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. This is very interesting. I happened to comment on a post on LinkedIn and you responded back to me and then I saw Mr. Menopause. I have to talk to this man. I have to know more. And then when I saw what you do, I was like, okay, yes. All right. Can you please share with us how you got the name Mr. Menopause? How did that come about?
Yes, for sure. So a little bit more about my background. So I've been actually working in women's hormones, health, and weight management for over 20 years. And a lot of my clients that I got at the time were through private clients or through referrals. I never had to advertise or anything like that. And then, of course, wonderful COVID happened. And so when COVID happened, everything went online. And so that was the first time that I had to actually put myself out in the public. I was surprised to find how much pushback I got about being a man in the menopause space because like I said, previously I'd been working and women were coming to me, seeking me out. So it was a little odd at first. And I started feeling myself being very defensive. And so I wasn't able to get my message out because I was constantly having to defend the fact that I'm a man talking about menopause. And then finally, one woman said something to me to the effect of, no uterus, no opinion. Who are you to think that you could be talking about menopause? And then something just clicked in my head. And because of my background, and it just said in my head, you're Mr. Menopause. That's who you are. And so immediately I looked online to see if it was registered and it was not. So I trademarked it. And from that moment on, I just focused on my mission and kind of like pushed the noise away. Because I did realize that that's a very small set of people that are going to have that issue. At the time, it seemed like that was all I was getting. So I kind of created that persona so that when women did come and see me, they knew immediately, look, I'm a man. I'm talking about this. If you want to stay, I'm Mr. Menopause. If not, I understand. I know, some women even may have trauma behind something and don't want to speak to a man about this because it is a very personal thing. And I understand that. So I wanted to make sure that my brand was very visible and understood that I'm a man in this space.
That's a great story. And I know what you mean, coining the menopause queen. I looked that up as well. And there's Dr. Mary Claire Haver. She's the queen of menopause, but the menopause queen itself, I managed to get in, and I understand. And for the same reasons,
Exactly.
helping women get through this. I appreciate the fact that you're a man in this space, even though initially women might, like you say, sometimes get a little on edge about that because we've seen everything in the past be from men, but they're not women, so they don't understand our bodies. There's the science behind it, but I want to let you know right off the bat that I do appreciate a man in this space because it is nice to have that perspective. Early on, when I started the podcast, I even had my husband come on and be a guest and share his perspective. I mean, part of my journey, part of the problem in my journey was his own health and things that were going on with him, and what was going on with him affected me. So that was a twist that I have. But from a man's perspective, you watched your mother struggle. Can you walk us through how,
Yeah.
what was happening?
Interesting enough, so it actually happened. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio originally, and we had a snow day where we were snowed in. I was a teenager, and we couldn't go to school. My sister just happened to be visiting. She's 9 years older than me, so she was out of the house, but she happened to be visiting, got snowed in as well. And we were sitting at the table talking, and we kept hearing this weird noise coming from my mom's bedroom. It was like this. And we're like, what is going on? And so we knock on the door. There was no response. So we slowly opened the door. And she was like like something out of a movie. Her window was wide open. There was snow and wind blowing into her room, literally, with the curtains flying and everything. She's standing in front of the window, crumbled piece of paper in one hand, fan in the other hand, in her underwear, sweating profusely with no relief.
My goodness.
And my mom was one of those people that people went to for support and for help. She ran a battered women and children's center. She did all these different things helping other people. So it was the first time that I saw her in a state where she was, I guess, vulnerable, and then other things started happening, these migraines that started happening, her weight changed. And then again, this confident woman started becoming less confident. And at the time, I had no clue what it was. And back then, they didn't even talk about menopause. They called it the change or the change of life. So it
Yes,
didn't even have the menopause name.
that's
And
right.
so it really wasn't until maybe almost 3 decades later, when I was actually working in health and fitness with my female clients, that I started seeing similar symptoms. And I'm like, wait a minute, my mom went through that. And then other things would happen that were very similar to my mom's. And I'm like, wait, we're decades later. Healthcare has progressed. Why are women still not getting the help that they need? And that was when I was introduced to the menopause aspect of it. So also a little bit different. What makes my work different is that my original background was in hormone and endocrine function. So I was focusing on health reversal. So I didn't
Endocrine
realize because at that time I didn't realize that my mother's issue was a hormone issue. I thought it was
hormone.
a
Yeah.
health issue. So I was helping women reverse their health issues initially, like the thyroid, the adrenals, all these different functions. And estrogen and the reproductive system was part of it, but I wasn't focused on just that singular part. And again, it wasn't until a few years later that I even realized that I was helping women with menopause symptoms, not knowing that's what I was doing, basically. And so when I got my certification in menopause was after one client that I've had for 23 years. I've actually trained her through her marriage, all three of her kids, and now through menopause. And so when she went through menopause, that's when she first started talking about the hot flashes. And that's when I looked into getting certified in menopause and wanting to learn more about that. And that's how I started working primarily in menopause itself. And once I realized also too that it's yes, it is a issue about women getting the support that they need, but it's also about understanding what you need, right? So how
Yes.
can you go and get support if you don't know what's happening and you don't know what support is available?
Yes.
And that's when I started working on the education piece because helping women with symptoms was easy, but I was only helping one woman at a time, right? Whereas the education piece, I was able to expand and get that information out to more women. And that's when I started doing the videos and all that stuff online. And it really wasn't until about 2 years ago that I decided to write the book itself on the symptoms. Because again, when women were going through my program, they say, I didn't even realize that was a menopause symptom or this was a
Ah,
menopause symptom. If I had known, I would have done I thought it was just a part of getting older, and
yeah.
so they didn't think there was relief available, and
I thought
once
the
I told
meltdowns I
them
was having was because of, well, it was part I doesn't life sometimes doesn't help, let's put it that way,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Because in all how we do, my dad and my mother-in-law passed away 2 weeks apart
Wow, yeah.
when I was like, yeah. But prior to that, I know now that and that was when I was like 44, but when I was 38, I know now that I started peri around 38. And I didn't know that that was called perimenopause. And that was another traumatic event. We had, some stuff with our daughter, and we don't realize that life events can actually trigger these onset things sometimes early. And I know that is a thing because I also saw it with my husband. My husband was diagnosed with celiac disease not long after his mom passed.
Mhm. And there's so many triggers. I always tell people one of the things I think is important, and this goes back to men being part of the conversation as well, is that I always say menopause is not a woman's health issue. It's a woman's life issue. It
Mm.
impacts her physically, cognitively, and emotionally. So that means it's going to impact her social life, her work life, and her home life. And guess what? In all those areas, there's going to be men. Right? So men need to understand what's happening to women so that they can be empathetic, so they can be supportive rather than dismissive like a lot of men are because they just think you're having a mood swing or you're just in a bad mood
You're
or
being bitchy.
yeah, exactly. They're not knowing. But here's something else that's interesting. You had mentioned, your husband and things like that. I interviewed a man who was actually going through andropause, which is
Mhm.
when men's testosterone drops at the same time his wife was going through menopause. They both were having hot flashes. They both were having mood swings. But guess what? Neither one of them were talking to each other about it. And I always say, if you don't think women are talking to each other about menopause, do you think men are talking to each other about andropause? So nobody's talking to anybody. So nobody's getting assistance, support, or relief. That's one of the reasons why I also have a program called What Every Man Needs to Know About Menopause, where I do a talk about what men should know as well.
There's the communication and the understanding with each other. And I'm so glad that you're mentored andropause too, because though my husband wasn't actually diagnosed with andropause, he exhibits other menopausal symptoms. He doesn't have hot flashes or things like that, but he was diagnosed with a pituitary tumor.
Hmm.
So his testosterone went down and his prolactin started going up. So there were other physical features that were going on. And then he was put on this medication, Dostanex. And that's when my hell began because then his testosterone went way up and he was on that medication for 5 years before we went to a counselor.
Yeah.
And we're talking about it, and he said, "You're on that. That makes so much sense." And then come to find out the other side effects, like different addictions, gambling addiction, sex addiction, ADHD like symptoms. And then everything made so much sense.
Yeah.
So
And what's
now he's on
interesting too,
testosterone gel, but it still is a little touchy because there are mood fluctuations. So I kind of have to keep on about keeping physical, making sure, like, dude, go lift some weights. You can produce your own testosterone. You know what I
but you know what? Also, too, it's important to note that testosterone, just like estrogen, is going to need to be regulated to see if he needs a lower dose, a higher dose, just like women with estrogen. And going back to what you were saying about men being open to being part of the conversation, at the same time, I also think it's important for women to be open to having men in the conversation because
Yes.
another thing that I've noticed, and I noticed this on a lot of the conversations where women gather to speak. In fact, Oprah Winfrey did when she did her special 2 years ago. The first thing that came out of her mouth is, "Men, this is not for you." As soon as you say that, men check out. because they're, well, if I don't need to be here, I'm not going to be here. So I think that's also important to note that men need to be invited in the conversation, because if they
Yes.
don't feel invited, because I can tell you, I'm a healthcare professional in menopause. And when I heard Oprah say that, I wanted to leave. So I can only imagine how men who aren't in menopause felt. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
also important to be open to having men in the conversation, because we can't provide support if we don't know support is needed, you know?
I absolutely agree. And it might be a little touchy with some people, but it all kind of comes down to the relationship that you have with your partner. If you have a healthy relationship, you're going to be okay to talk about this and explain what's happening to you to help them understand. And it's okay to say there are some things that you don't understand that's
Yeah.
happening. I'm actually really, really fortunate. My husband actually does my research or a lot of research. He actually really knows as much or more. He goes, that's just the way he's wired. He does that, you know. He's a
That's great.
researcher. So he comes back and I know that I'm very fortunate that way. But to be honest though, between you, me, and the wall, part of the reason he is like that is because of his, I think, higher female hormones. He has that empathy.
Yeah.
He has that, and there are not all men do have that. They're higher in the testosterone or more jock, whatever. I know that's kind of a stereotyping, but
But it's also, it can also be cultural, you know,
yes,
and also
yes,
there's a lot of different things. And then also too, I think it's also important that it's not just about partners. It's about male employers. It's about male employees. It's about your teenage son. Like for me, like I think back now and I say, if I had only known what I know now, because I remember my mom going and closing herself in the bedroom every night. But
mm,
we had only heard that one time. So I'm thinking, how many times she must have just been suffering alone in her bedroom. And I'm a mama's boy. So I know that if I had known, I would have at least gone and checked on her, or, you know what I mean? So it's more than, I think that it's something that everyone should be educated in, even daughters, because teenage daughters that may be having conflict with their menopausal age mom, they're both going through hormone fluctuations. So they don't know that it's actually part of that is why they may be butting heads.
yeah.
It's really a thing
If
where
you
it
think
should
about
be
it, that
more
makes
globally known.
that's absolutely makes sense because if you think about the age, depending on when a what age a woman becomes a mother, nowadays it's in their 30s, sometimes mid 30s. And if I think back to me, I mean, I was a young mother. I had my kids at 26 and 29. So, but my daughter is now married and they're trying, and she's going to be 32. And I think back to my own experience. If I know now that I started perimenopause at 38, some women are having babies
Yeah.
still.
And some women can start as early as 35. I know at least 8 women that I've treated that started much earlier. And then we can't forget there's medically induced menopause that can start
Yes.
as young as your 20s, you know?
Yes.
So, yeah.
And I'm so happy to be part of the movement now. I didn't understand how big it actually was when I decided to write my book 2 years ago about my own story, my own journey, about getting down that hole, down to the lowest of lows, where I actually thought about ending my life.
Oh, wow.
Right? And then working my way back. And I mean, I used a lot of mindset and stuff like that, but it was all part and parcel because even though my focus is on reconnecting with yourself and self-love first and that kind of thing, right? What I discovered was that does affect every area of our life,
Yes.
particularly near this time when we're going through that depressive state.
Yeah. Yes.
We're not feeling good about ourselves and that affects every other area of your life. So
And
start there.
that depressive state is a chemical reaction that's also happening because of menopause. I always let women know, if you've already had anxiety and depression, it may be heightened during menopause. And what the doctor is going to think is, let's put her on more depression medication. Well, that's not what she actually needs. But unfortunately, as I'm sure you know, I'm not sure how it is in Canada, but here in the States, most doctors aren't even educated well in menopause. I think they get 4 hours at the most of training in all their years of education,
I
right?
did
So
hear that.
unless they go and get some kind of an extra certification, which is offered by the Menopause Society, they don't really know. So they're only going based off of what they learned in school, which is if a woman comes in depressed, you give her depression medication. Or if she has anxiety, you do this. Whereas they're not looking at the other things, as we said earlier, that could be triggers, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know who I heard say that? Dr. Mary Claire Haver.
But yeah,
She
yeah.
actually admitted, she said, "You know what?
Yeah, she
I'm an
admitted it.
OBGYN." She's a baby doctor, not a, you know what I mean? One thing I don't understand is why endocrinologists, they're hormone doctors. Why don't they don't deal with menopause? And then there's the hormone replacement therapy. And I think that's a total personal choice as well. I was on it for 2 years. It was helpful in some ways, other ways not. Long story short, I decided to go off of it because something my GP did say to me, and
Mhm.
it got me concerned. I'm just for myself, my own personal choice. I'm not a person who takes long-term medication and, become reliant and all that kind of stuff. That's just the way my brain is wired. So when I started doing the work on myself and then, moving my body in the right way, which it's funny how it's all connected, as I'm sure you know, when you start moving your body in the right way, that gives you more clarity to be able to fuel it properly and so on. And your mood can increase and so on and so on and so on.
Yeah.
Where are you at with all that with what you do as far as treatment?
So I because I have a background in naturopathy and my background was always based on starting with lifestyle, nutrition, and fitness first. Because even if you do take HRT or other medication, it can actually be helped with better health.
Exactly.
So you may even not even need as much HRT if you're in a healthy state. I had a client who's like you, her doctor wanted to put her on HRT because she was having hot flashes every 30 minutes. Well, when I looked at her background and looked at the endocrine side of things, what actually happened was she had a high thyroid. They put her on thyroid medication. It made her hypothyroid, and that caused hot flashes. So once they changed her medication, the hot flashes went away. So she would have been on HRT, still having hot flashes, still having all these things. But when we focused on her health first, we were able to mitigate symptoms. And then she was able to say, well, this symptom over here isn't so bad. I don't need HRT for that. I can do this rather than going right on medication. I'm always about if you do have to be on medication, it should always be in conjunction with holistic practices as well,
I
because
believe
they
as well.
work together. And sometimes you don't even need the medication at all. One thing that you were saying about how we change and things, I always say this too. One of the reasons why I think that there are so many health issues in midlife, whether it's menopause related or not. If you think about every stage of life that we go through, right? Baby to toddler, toddler to child, child to teenager, teenager to young adult. In every one of those phases, we naturally change how we eat, how we live, our community, our physical activity. But when we go from adult to middle age, what does everybody do? They want to fight the change. They want to do what they did when they were younger. They want to
I
do,
know.
and I'm like, but your body is telling you you can't do that.
I preach.
I'm like, your 55-year-old muscles shouldn't be exercising the way your 35 muscles did. Your 55-year-old digestive tract can't digest food the way your 25-year-old does. So you have to change those things. And
Far
when you,
be it for us to actually, take better care of ourselves,
yeah,
you know?
and right. But I think it also goes back to and again, I'm not sure what the medical thing is in Canada, but here, where everything is about take a pill, take a this, get
Yeah.
on that. And it's like, but your body can do so. The human body is an amazing vessel.
Yes.
It is literally designed to repair
We
itself.
we produce cells every day, right? We
Yes. Yeah.
produce new cells every day.
Every day. You have a whole new body in 7 years. But I always say, if that body's going to be healthy or unhealthy depends on what you do to it, what you give to it, how you treat it. So you have to treat, and that goes 10 times more for menopause and andropause, because you're having a natural transition and your body is telling you you need to focus on this way. All the women that come to me, they want to focus on losing weight. And I say, your hormones don't care that you want to lose 15 pounds. Your hormones want to be healthy. You need to give your hormones what they want. And every time they do that, the weight just naturally goes off
Exactly.
because
When
the
you
body.
balance those, yes, the chain reaction. When you
Exactly.
get to the root cause of it, you do your blood work. Where are my levels at right now? At my estrogen, my testosterone, and turned out I had high testosterone, like naturally. So I'm like, okay. Or the advocacy for ourselves. That's a big thing I really encourage, talk about a lot. That we really need to have conversations like this with people, do research, whether it's online or talk to people to educate yourself so that you know what's going on with your body. And then, because I don't know about, I find myself, I go in prepared to the doctor's office and say, I want to check this, this, and this.
You know what? One of the things that I do prior to that, first and foremost, I always say you need to make sure that your doctor is even able to help you. I actually have a 5-step question where I say these are the 5 things you need to ask your doctor first to see if they can even help you with menopause. Because if not, you need to find a doctor that can. But I always say track your symptoms first because sometimes your symptoms, like if you have a cluster of symptoms in one area, it may not show up on the blood work. But if you're able to go in and say, I'm having these cluster of symptoms, the doctors may see something or find something, again, that's outside of menopause that could be the issue. That's one of the reasons why I wrote the book and what's in the book. I give the holistic things you should do when you should go talk to your doctor. One woman said it was like a menopause encyclopedia for symptoms, right? So it's like that kind of thing so that, like you're saying, women know what to do, how to do it in a healthy and respectful way. And you can take the book with you and say, this is what I'm feeling, right? This right here. So the doctor understands what's actually happening. And like you said, always be prepared when you go to your doctor. Have your questions already written out, all the symptoms. Even if you're on new supplements or something like that, take that as well, because sometimes your supplements can be interacting with medications and you don't even know it because the
Yes.
supplements aren't natural or healthy, so to speak, you know?
Yes. Ladies, men, whoever, but particularly ladies for this one. And this is something I learned myself. I did go on an antidepressant for a little while just to help me on with the curve till I was able to get myself back. And I discovered that there were certain vitamins I should not take while I was on an antidepressant because it actually lessened the effects of it. So again, education, and advocacy for yourself. It's so important, so important.
Yes, that self-advocacy is a big thing. That's one of the things that I push so much with my clients. And I always tell them when women, even like when women say to me, we don't want a man telling them what to do. I'm like, I don't want to tell you what to do. I want you to be able to go into the doctor well informed for yourself so that you can make an educated choice for yourself. So you know what, because a lot of people, doctors will say go on HRT. They're not telling you that there's other medications that can help you besides HRT. There's actually other non-medical things that can help you besides HRT. So if you don't have that full scope of everything, again, like you said, that education about what's actually available, you're just going to go with what that doctor gives you. And again, they may not even know what they're doing. They just may have had an HRT person come in and sell them on their product, right?
Yes,
You
exactly.
need to know what's happening.
And that's one thing I was just thinking of, and not to diss the doctors or anything.
And then it's not that. If they don't know, they don't know, you know?
Yeah, what I was thinking was also that when we go to the doctor, a lot of times that's their job. That's what they think that we want from them is for them to write us a prescription. We want to go home with something in our hand that's going to make me feel better. But then there's the other side of that where you get into the politics of being, or like you say, the pharmaceutical companies. There is a generation of people as well that they go and listen to the doctor and that's it. Whatever the doctor tells them they need to take, they do. So they end up on, a string of
That was my
medications
mom.
and side effects of one. They're on another medication to counteract the side effects of that medication, then on another medication on that to counteract the side effects of that medication. And let's bear that in mind, everyone is that all medications have some side effect.
Yep, that was
Even some
totally
vitamins
my
have.
mom.
Yeah.
That was totally my mom. She would I remember on her bedside table, there were so many medications, and it literally was this was to counteract what was happening to that, and that would and it was just but there was no relief because there was constantly a symptom of something, right? A
Yeah.
side effect of something. So it's just this kind of, thing that keeps going and going. And I always say, like you said, not meaning to bash the doctors, because at the end of the day, doctors only know what they know, right?
Yeah.
They only
They only
know
know
what
what
they're
they taught,
taught. So
and they're still working
it's
on
more about the
studies from
medical
20 years ago.
schools that need
Yes.
to, that's who we need to be on, is the medical
Yes.
schools. They need to
Yes. They need to update their studies.
Yes. And they're trying to do it here, but like I say to women, but that means that you're still having to wait for something. You have to wait for the research. You have to wait for the people to learn. You have to wait for them to go. So what are you going to do in the meantime?
Yes.
That's why you need to be informed so that you can take the reins, and that self-care, self-love thing that you got going on. It starts with you taking care of
Yeah.
you. And that can
Us
only happen.
managing things. Instead of them managing us, we need to manage them. We
I
need to
always say that I
manage.
always say it's a team. Like,
Yes.
your healthcare professional, they're not there to give you a prescription. They're there to give you options, right? They're there to give you support, resources, options. And like, one of the things I teach is, if your doctor cannot give you, then ask them for referral to someone who can. When you ask those 5 questions, if your doctor can't answer those, say, well, do you know a doctor that does specialize in this? And if your doctor's not willing to do that, that's a red flag, because they should be willing to get you the support that you need for your health, your body, your longevity, not just based on their ego or what they think or what they believe is the thing to be. It should be what is actually right for you.
I agree totally. I agree totally. If your doctor's over 50, get a
Mhm.
new doctor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get a younger doctor.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a sad truth, though. It's a sad truth that
Yeah.
because
Although
they
Gen
don't
X
have the
people do
updated
rock. I'm a Gen
information.
X. So I mean, we do rock. We came up in a different generation where we didn't wear helmets and things like that.
Yes, I'm right there with you.
That explains a lot. But on the same token, we I think we do kind of have that curiosity and that edge about us.
Yeah,
People of this generation that
because
they're
we're more self-sufficient because we
yes,
had to be.
yes. Yes, and that's why ladies, women who are say my age and when I, hear about struggling and saw it, in other groups and people about, not being able to cope and I just it hurts my heart. I feel so bad for them to be able to because there's to me that there's a lot going on. There's a psychological, emotional, physical and to tell you the truth, I get it. I think getting hold of the psychological part, you know, wrapping your head around it to be able to have kind of that mental strength, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like exercise that muscle as well. The mental strength to be able to say, I can do this. Like,
And I
I don't
think
know.
the first step to that is also knowing that this is something that is actually triggered by menopause as well. So it's not just you're losing your mind or you're getting dementia. It's not that. It's actually
Absolutely.
something chemically happening that is natural process that could be triggering this.
Totally agree. I totally agree. I'm thank you so much for coming out. This has
Yes.
been a wonderful conversation. I want to let everybody know that all of Mr. Menopause's info will be down below in the info in the comments. I think you're really on a great path here. I really so appreciate what you're doing for us, for women. So thank you.
Symptom relief.
Right?
Every woman's journey is different. So
Yeah.
just because your sister's using an HRT, that does not mean that you need it or have
Exactly. And I totally agree. And I appreciate you saying that.
it.
But
Absolutely.
we're just out there letting people know that there are options and we're here for them.
Yes, absolutely, and so many more options than they even realize.
Mm,
That's the thing that it's so sad to me that women just think they have HRT and that's it. There are so many options that can help. You just have to be willing to do.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So that concludes this episode of the Menopause Mind Self Love podcast. Thank you so much for joining us again. So I am going to sign off as I always do. Please remember, choose self love first. Bye for now.